I gave you a call.
All right. All right.
Greetings and salutations. I'd like to welcome everyone to another meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous here at the Design for Living Big Book Study. As Ellie has stated, we are not affiliated with any specific fellowship. We are just lovers of the book because it contains the program of recovery. In the beginning of the book, the first italicized paragraph says to show other deranged people, that will be my compendium word for all the myriads of alcoholism, how we have recovered, precisely how we have recovered, is the main purpose of this book. So we don't deviate because the success rate was actually pretty tremendous and still is. On page XI, the preface, preface, the one thing is the first edition appeared in April of 1939. The reason I thought that was significant is because we are in April of 2025, which means the big book celebrated 86 years in circulation. And with the exception of the size of the fellowship, the content has remained basically identical with the exception of a few word changes. So in other words, this works, and if it works, we don't fix it. At the end of the preface, the last couple sentences say, if you have a drinking problem or a using problem, we hope that you may pause in reading one of the 42 personal stories and think, yes, that happened to me, or more important, yes, I felt like that, or most important, yes, I believe this program can work for me too. It's real easy to get caught up on this side of this, the first 164, and that's all I need to live my life. When I had surgery, I made sure that the doctor went to medical school and knew something about medicine. I didn't care if he knew anything about the first 164. And what this book is saying, and this entire book, this entire volume, contains stuff for us where God constantly discloses more to you and to us. So the stories in the book have merit. We don't study them on this platform. If you want to read the stories in some other meetings, some groups have it, and they actually have a book out that has all the stories from all the editions. Because some stories were taken out because, believe it or not, some of the alcoholics in the first 100 drank again. Some of them died of alcoholism again. They took those stories out because they didn't have the depth and weight that they wanted. Elizabeth, anything about the preface before we move on to the forwards? Okay.
No, I'm with you. The last three sentences tell me why I'm reading this book. So I know if I'm like the people in the book and whether or not the program can work for me too. That's it.
So the forward to the first edition, which I mentioned a minute ago, we of Alcoholics Anonymous, this fellowship and this book are more than 100 men and women who have recovered from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. And here's the italics I was talking about, to show other alcoholics precisely how we have recovered is the main purpose of this book. I want to share something that stuck out to me after reading it for a long time. It says, for them, we hope these pages will, and we're on page XIII. I'm sorry, I assume that everyone knows where I'm at. For them, we hope these pages will prove so convincing that no further authentication will be necessary. We think this account of our experiences, and I want to put the emphasis on the word experiences, will help many to better understand the alcoholic. Many do not comprehend that the alcoholic is a very sick person. And besides, we are sure that our way of living has its advantages to all. In Bill's story, he talks about having experienced Bill being the co-founder, if you don't know, Bill W. And he was visited by an old school friend who carried a message of hope, where this whole thing kind of initiated, started. But there's something that really stuck out to me on page 9, the last sentence in the book. Talks about his visit. He was explaining what happened, and he said he had come to pass his experience along to me. It did not say that he came to share his story. I believe that this whole book is about me transmuting rather than transmitting a spiritual experience when the divine in me activates the divine in you. Each day, somewhere in the world, recovery begins when one alcoholic talks to another, sharing experience, strength, and hope. And I believe that's what this whole thing is about, is me sharing the experience of what happened, the spiritual experience. I could be wrong, and I can't show you any evidence that supports that. It's just the way the book spoke to me. So I preface it with that. Elizabeth, anything about the first edition?
Yeah, when people hear the word recovered, notice that this is where it talks about what that means. So if it's ever confusing, if you think, oh, does that mean cured? No, it means that we have recovered from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body, because now we have a solution. And I like how it says in the italics. And what do they say? There is one thing to know. It cost more to get italics back then. And I like how it says precisely how we have recovered. So in a minute, we're going to hear about if you don't have any other solution, if nothing else has ever worked for you. They're trying to tell us this is what worked for them. So that's it.
There's some more history in the forward to the second edition about a dinner party. What I really think that I wanted to focus on was on page XIX, Roman numeral 19. The very last sentence at the bottom of the page says, with the internal difficulties of our adolescent period were being ironed out, public acceptance of AA grew by leaps and bounds. For this, there were two principal reasons: the large number of recoveries, number one, and the reunited homes. What they did was showing how they were saving families that were falling apart. Some might argue that women weren't working back then, they were in the Depression, and where were they going to go? Back to their folks' house and whatnot. But there was something happened, because it talks about it, what we read in the religious view on AA, that Alcoholics Anonymous is where the supernatural meets the natural. So there was something that was happening. And I think now you can trade in relationships like you can trade in automobiles or computers. That's unfortunate, but true. But that's why this met such widespread approval with the public, because there was no solution at the time, at least one with any staying power. You, Elizabeth?
Well, I'd like to, can we cover XVI real quick? There's some really good stuff on there I'd love to talk about.
Absolutely, cover XVI.
So we're on XVI, guys. And so they talk about the stuff we got from the Oxford groups. Great. But a little bit further down, the last paragraph on that page, I think is really important, right? Because Dr. Bob had the spiritual side, but until he heard about the description of the alcoholic hopelessness, which actually is disputed somewhere else, that's fine. But the point is, I think that Bill really emphasized to him the program of action. I can't just go sit in church. I need to take some actions. And this is really, I've met so many people that they try to get by with half measures and they can't. It's not enough. So this emphasizes so much, like, this is hopeless. Most alcoholics are doomed. This is not this isn't like a halfway thing, right? I had a talk this morning with somebody about compliance versus surrender and what that means, and it's like, I have to be all in. And until Dr. Bob really saw that, right, and got that understanding with another alcoholic, he didn't quite understand what was going, why he couldn't get it. And then down there it says, this seemed to prove that one alcoholic could affect another as no non-alcoholic could. And then I love the top of page XVII. It also indicated that strenuous work, one alcoholic with another, was vital to permanent recovery. Now, I got here in 1988 at the height of the self-help movement. Okay. People would say, if you have a problem, go to a meeting and talk about your problem and get advice. They didn't say go help somebody. That was some magical thing that you did later on when you reach some certain point, oh, okay, then I'm ready to sponsor. Oh, hell no. This program started because Bill knew he was going to drink if he didn't find someone to help. He didn't call his sponsor, right? He had a sponsor. He didn't call him. He had Abby in the Oxford group, right? I think this is one of, if you could have like the top 20 sentences in this book, this would be one of them. Because how many people have you seen? They're not helping anybody. And boy, did they have a lot of time to think about themselves. You see it, right? When they're walking around stuck in self again, because they have too much time. It's like, hey, are you help? Why don't you go get some newcomers to help and see if you have time to think about, whatever it is that you think is a problem today. I mean, it's such a shift. And it's real interesting how many people in recovery you see, tons of people in the first 5 years and tons of people over 30. Why? Because people go back and get into self and see how that works. And then it doesn't work. So they come back here and they're like, oh my God, like I need help. I need, right, Bill? Bill knows, but I love that. And look at those adjectives. I always say, pay attention in the book with the italics when it's repetitive, right? They repeat stuff totally. My sponsor had me go through the book like an English teacher once. And I'm telling you what, from that perspective, it's not the best written thing, right? Because it's, oh, he's repeating it again. Oh, repeated it again. And when they use these strong words, vital, strenuous, vital, and permanent, those are strong words. Can you really buy into that? That's what it's telling me, right? I can have permanent recovery if I go do strenuous work with others. And I learned that the hard way in year 34 when I went through a really difficult time. And the only thing saving me was my work with others, because being in Elizabeth's self was awful, what was happening in my life. And the days I was meeting with people were the best days, because I didn't have to be right here. I was with them. So I just love that. And yeah, that's it. Back to you, Bill, on that.
And I'm handicapped, so I apologize for that. I live in Cleveland, Ohio. In fact, if they didn't ban me from taking you guys down through a tour of Dr. Bob's house, the people in the UK who may never get here to see it, I would take you down there and put it on the screen. We've done that a couple times. So they said, hey, you can't do that because someone might be walking in the background. You're going to break anonymity. I said, I'm pretty sure that the people in the UK do not know anyone here in Akron, but we had to honor that. So it's giving the history. And where Elizabeth said that the stockbroker, Bill W., needed to talk to another alcoholic for the stockbroker's sobriety, that took place 25 minutes from where I'm at right now, or 25 miles. So I can go down there any day I want. Matter of fact, sometimes I go to Dr. Bob's grave and we talk to each other. When I'm spiritually fit, I hear right from him. So I forget sometimes that you guys might not know the history or have the experience, but there's so much there in so many books about it. It would be an inadequate representation. And when we get later on in the book, A Vision for You, what we talked about in the appendices, they're going to tell us how this thing took off more accurately. And these things are given a history, like I said, and there's so many, Howard and Page, and they go line by line, and it's amazing. So I just had it on my heart today that we were going to get into something else, what the book was telling me, rather than what you could read and decipher on your own. That's where I was at with that. Now, and then another on page, we're back at XX.
Wait, can
Second
we
full
say
paragraph.
something about XIX real quick?
Go ahead.
We talked a lot about the traditions the last few weeks, but on XIX, when I take people through the book, I give them a little intro here because it is important, right? The conviction grew that AAs had to hang together or die separately. We had to unify our fellowship or pass off the scene. And so even if you're new, to start to think about the bigger picture and that I'm part of something now. This isn't all about me. If it's about me, I'm still in the disease. I can start to think about what am I part of and actively try to see, like if I'm part of a new group, someone tells me, oh, hey, if you want to do service in the group, you got to show up 15 minutes early. I don't show up 10 minutes early and have a fit because I got replaced, right? I see that, oh, that group is doing something a certain way and I can be a good group member and contribute to the unity of that. So I like to give them just a little bit of intro because that's also on page XIX, that one big paragraph in the middle, right? That's a little introduction to the traditions, and you can write that off to the side and say, they're kind of giving us a tiny little snippet of where they came up with that, right? Because we're a group of, what does Billy then like to say? We have an organizational problem because we're a group of people who don't get along with people or something like that. It's really funny, right? So it's good to just kind of know that this is coming, right? We're going to work the steps for our own personal recovery first. That usually comes first when people do stuff, but later on, we're going to learn more about what it means to be part of this thing that I now carry with me. AA's responsibility statement, this is in each of our hands. There's nobody out there. There's no traditions police out there. It's all of us to help people know what this is and what it isn't. And I think it's important that as a sponsor's job, it's important to help people know what AA is and what it isn't. Because there's a lot of people out there that are confused about that. That's it. Thanks.
I just had a group conscience. And I think there's probably more information in the forwards to the second, third, and fourth edition. What's the big deal if we read them? It's going to talk about recovery and what, what we're going to get to. I kind of, as I said, maybe looked at the preface and the forward to the first edition, which didn't tell a lot. But maybe let's read the forward to the second edition.
No,
and
no,
go
we don't
from
have to
there.
read the whole thing. I think we did cover the couple of important
Okay.
things. I think you're right. Let's get to the meat of it. But just to
Okay.
point out, there are some good nuggets in there for sure.
Yep, and incidentally, the preamble came out or was written and placed in the grapevine long after the Alcoholics Anonymous was written and the fellowship took the name. But notice at the bottom of the forward of the first edition, the last sentence says, "We are not an organization in the conventional sense of the word. There are no fees or dues whatsoever. The only requirement for membership is an honest desire to stop drinking. We are not allied with any particular faith, sect, or denomination, nor do we oppose anyone. We simply wish to be helpful to those who are afflicted." So they kind of had a preamble, if you will, long ago. It's posted in the grapevine, and someone who was not one of these folks wrote it years after the fellowship was established. I just put in the forward to the third edition on XXII was the last paragraph. It says, "In spite of the great increase in the size and the span of the fellowship, or maybe even in the platforms, at its core, it remains simple and personal. Each day, somewhere in the world, recovery begins when one alcoholic talks with another alcoholic, sharing experience, strength, and hope." Do you want to talk about all the languages it came out in, or?
No, but
Okay.
I did want to say the last sentence in the forward to the second edition is, if you have not found an answer elsewhere, maybe you'll find one in the pages of this book. So it doesn't mean that we're the only ones. We're not a monopoly on recovery, right? But if other things haven't worked for you, maybe you could try this, right? I have somebody really struggling and they're very stuck, right? And I'm like, why don't you just give this a try, since nothing else has worked, right? And trust the process, and at some point it'll click. But what you said, Bill, I think is so important, right? Because it says each day somewhere in the world, recovery begins when one alcoholic talks with another alcoholic, sharing experience, strength, and hope. What do we not share? We don't tell people what to do or give them advice about things we have no experience on. How many times do you see people out there like just deciding they're going to be in charge of somebody else's life, judge what they're doing, tell them they shouldn't do it? That's not AA. If I have experience with it, I'll share with you my experience. If I don't, then it's just an opinion, unless it's in the book. It's either it's in the book or it's my experience. Otherwise, it's just an opinion, and I think that's really important too. Yeah, I like that, Josh. And then later it says we don't talk down to people from a spiritual hilltop. That's in working with others. I think it's maybe page 95, if I'm right. I just shared it with somebody recently. Yeah, 95. Never talk down to an alcoholic from any moral or spiritual hilltop. Simply lay out the kit of spiritual tools for his inspection. Show him how they worked with you. That's it. That's it from me. Thanks.
Believe it or not, I didn't highlight anything in the forward to the fourth, but I look at this last paragraph here, it's probably important. While our literature has preserved, that's on XXIV, while our literature has preserved the integrity of the AA message, sweeping changes in society as a whole are reflected in new customs and practices within the fellowship. Taking advantage of technological advances, for example, AA members with computers can participate in meetings online, sharing with fellow alcoholics across the country or around the world. In any meeting anywhere, AA share experience, strength, and hope with each other in order to stay sober and help other alcoholics. Modem to modem or face to face, AA speaks the language of the heart in all its power and simplicity. That's beautiful. Guess what? This was written in 2001. or was published in 2001. Imagine how many more changes have taken place in society. And thank God Alcoholics Anonymous says we are all inclusive, never exclusive or forbidding. And it talks about the realm of the spirit, but this is what this is, the realm of the spirit. I thank God that Bill Wilson had 15 attempts at getting sober. Do you imagine if he got sober the first time? You could only come here one time and then the door was closed. Thank God that our co-founders had difficulty getting sober and understood the disease of alcoholism rather than a state of drunkenness. Two different animals. Anything on the fourth, Elizabeth, before you start on the doctor's opinion?
Oh, yeah. If somebody says they think online meetings aren't valid, you can say, have you read this page on in the fourth forward to the fourth edition? It's just real simple. Thanks. And that's all I have to say. I do like the sentence on the previous page. We are people who normally wouldn't mix, and it said these words proved to be far more visionary than they had founded. I think there's so many things about this book that are visionary, and not always did they have the exact terms that we might use today. I think the word anxious doesn't appear in the big book. It does in the 12 and 12, but full of fear. There's so many things. It's like things we deal with even after we get sober. They didn't have like the language that we have today, but they already talked about it. They know the mental blank spot. I mean, a lot of things in here are visionary, I think. That's it.
Okay. You're XXV, the doctor's opinion, starring Elizabeth BL from Kentucky.
Let me get my glasses. Thank you. The doctor's opinion. We of Alcoholics Anonymous believe that the reader will be interested in the medical estimate of the plan of recovery described in this book. Convincing testimony must surely come from medical men who have had experience with the sufferings of our members and have witnessed our return to health. A well-known doctor, chief physician at a nationally prominent hospital specializing in alcoholic and drug addiction, gave Alcoholics Anonymous this letter. To whom it may concern, I have specialized in the treatment of alcoholism for many years. In late 1934, I attended a patient who, though he had been a competent businessman of good earning capacity, was an alcoholic of a type I had come to regard as hopeless. In the course of his third treatment, he acquired certain ideas concerning a possible means of recovery. As part of his rehabilitation, he commenced to present his conceptions to other alcoholics, impressing upon them that they must do likewise with still others. This has become the basis of a rapidly growing fellowship of these men and their families. This man and over 100 others appear to have recovered. I personally know scores of cases who were of the type with whom other methods had failed completely. These facts appear to be of extreme medical importance because of the extraordinary possibilities of rapid growth inherent in this group. They may mark a new epoch in the annals of alcoholism. These men may well have a remedy for thousands of such situations. You may rely absolutely on anything they say about themselves. Very truly yours, William D. Silkworth, MD. Bill, where'd he go? Here you are.
He gave a good recommendation for the book. And then he's going to elaborate. But I think even the most important thing about this, up until we get into the second letter, was found in what we're going to read next, which is where the author wrote, this is not the doctor's opinion, but it explains some things that are, I think, very important if you want to read through up till the doctor writes.
Okay. The physician who, at our request, gave us this letter has been kind enough to enlarge upon his views in another statement which follows. In this statement, he confirms what we who have suffered alcoholic torture must believe, that the body of the alcoholic is quite as abnormal as his mind. It did not satisfy us to be told that we could not control our drinking just because we were maladjusted to life, that we were in full flight from reality, or were outright mental defectives. These things were true to some extent, in fact, to a considerable extent with some of us, but we are sure that our bodies were sickened as well. In our belief, any picture of the alcoholic which leaves out this physical factor is incomplete. The doctor's theory that we have an allergy to alcohol interests us. As laymen, our opinion as to its soundness may, of course, mean little, but as axe-problem drinkers, we can say that his explanation makes good sense. It explains many things for which we cannot otherwise account. Though we work out our solution on the spiritual as well as an altruistic plane, we favor hospitalization for the alcoholic who is very jittery or befogged. More often than not, it is imperative that a man's brain be cleared before he is approached, as he has then a better chance of understanding and accepting what we have to offer. The doctor writes. Go ahead.
On that before I talk, or you want me to go and then you'll go?
You go first.
Okay. So it's interesting how he really elaborates on the mental condition, maladjusted to life, outright mental defects, full flight from reality. And he says any picture that leaves out the physical aspect is incomplete because they were treating alcoholism as if it were a mental illness. And I suppose it is, but it takes more than a medical solution. We talked about it last week. They were doing lobotomies on some people if they were just in that chronic state and could not stop. They were sterilizing women who could not stop. They put them in asylums. They locked them up. They were extricated from the community, thinking that there was something wrong mentally. And what he really does is elaborates, they're agreeing with that so as not to step on the toes of the medical profession, but they're letting them know when this doctor comes up with a theory that I get thirstier with each drink, and that doesn't happen to everyone who drinks alcohol. Therefore, alcoholism does not come in bottles, liquor stores, or bar rooms, but comes inside of human beings. That was the separation. And the one thing that spoke to me long ago, when it talks about we who have suffered alcoholic torture must believe the bodies and minds are different. How many of us standing behind the podium or sitting in our chairs now on Zoom did not say all my life I felt like a square peg in a round hole or a round hole in a rectangle? There was something different about us in our minds. We didn't know that it was a spiritual separation, a conscious separation from the power. But we talk about never felt like I belonged. I didn't fit. Everyone else had a book and I didn't. None of that was true, but it was the narrative in the alcoholic mind. And let's see if there's anything else. So when it talks about the man's brain being clear, I understand that the steps are the answer. And I understand that it's important that we get into this process of recovery, or if we're an alcoholic of the type described in this book, step one says we will drink again. But sometimes we got to let the man's brain be cleared. And I'm going to tell you what, people are coming in with stuff that really exacerbates alcoholism. And they might not be ready to sit down and look at their resentments if they're coming off alcohol and methamphetamine. They still may be talking to people that aren't there for 90 days later. So sometimes give them a break. It's very important when it talks about spiritual as well as altruistic plane where our service is presented. The steps are spiritual. The service is the altruism. So that's all I have to say on those 2 pages.
So I think that it's really interesting to me that, they put the doctor's opinion in the beginning of the book, because think about what they were dealing with back then, and I love how they point out that no, it's not about willpower. It's not willpower, and that needed to be told not only to the alcoholic, but to the people who are around each alcoholic. If it was that, like, how wonderful to have this guy who has all this experience, right? And he's coming in and saying, we don't know what to do, right? And then a little bit later on, we're going to read where he says that he thinks most alcoholics are doomed. So check out what these people have. And, I had a place, it was in December of 2022, and I was having a full-on anxiety attack all afternoon. Something was going on in my life I won't go into, but I thought, that's it. I need to call the doctor. I can't do this without medication anymore. And then it hit me. Elizabeth, there's no magic pill. Remember the doctor's opinion, right? If there was, you would be doing that. And I thought, great. I mean, I was sort of pissed off, right? I thought, all I've got is this simple kit of spiritual tools. I guess I'll just keep on using them. You know, and I was mad because I wanted to feel better right now. I want a magic pill, I want something to fix me right this minute. And thank God, like I am very involved with newcomers. And you know what? Their early days, they got to push through every hour. And I thought, I'm just having a newcomer day, right? Some days are just going to be like this. And I have these tools, but they're not always going to completely fix me and make me feel better because I have the doctor's opinion to remind me. You know, if that were true, they would have already done it. And as far as I know, they still haven't. So I can keep on practicing, you know, using these tools in my life. That's it for me. Do you want to do some more? Do you want to do some reading? No, come on. You take turns and then I'll read next. You're
Okay,
muted.
here
There
we
you
go.
go.
The doctor writes, the subject presented in this book seems to me to be of paramount importance to those afflicted with alcoholic addiction. I say this after many years' experience as medical director of one of the oldest hospitals in the country treating alcoholic and drug addiction. There was, therefore, a sense of real satisfaction when I was asked to contribute a few words on a subject which is covered in such masterly detail in these pages. We doctors have realized for a long time that some form of moral psychology was of urgent importance to alcoholics, but its application presented difficulties beyond our conception. What with our ultra-modern standards, our scientific approach to everything, we are perhaps not well equipped to apply the powers of good that lie outside our synthetic knowledge. Many years ago, one of the leading contributors to this book came under our care in this hospital, and while here he acquired some ideas which he put into practical application at once. Later, he requested the privilege of being allowed to tell his story to other patients here, and with some misgiving, we consented. The cases we have followed through have been most interesting. In fact, many of them are amazing. The unselfishness of these men as we have come to know them, the entire absence of profit motive, and their community spirit is indeed inspiring to one who has labored long and wearily in this alcohol field. Very powerful sentence coming up. They believe in themselves and still more in the power, capital P, which pulls chronic alcoholics back from the gates of death. Elizabeth, anything on that?
Yeah.
For those who don't know, this is the first, this Bill Wilson, what is doing is what we now know, and a lot of us don't know, is a 12-step call. Now it seems like people come in and look for resumes and take applications for sponsorship. What they did back when this was written is they went out and sponsored the alcoholic into what is now known as the fellowship, not the opposite. So people are coming on and they like what we hear and say, I want your number, you're going to be my sponsor. You live in Hollywood and I want to be a movie star, so you're going to be my sponsor. You got the name Josh B and you got a lot of money, so I want you to be my sponsor. None of those things are true.
Yeah. I forgot to mention something about it. It's imperative that a man's brain be cleared before he is approached. One thing we're finding out in my home group is, you know, being online takes away the barrier for entry for a drunk to come and listen. They're still drinking. They think they have a problem and they come and listen to us. But sometimes they want to talk to us too. Sometimes they're lucid and sometimes they're not, you know, and other newcomers can sometimes feel confused about how long do I try to talk to this person when they're getting more and more drunk. And so I pointed this sentence out, that, you know, you can try to talk to him if you want to. I don't. I say, hey, let's get your phone number and talk to you in the morning, you know, because I find that it's kind of futile in most cases, not all. It says, right, it says in most, where does it say? More often than not. More often than not. So sometimes they are lucid, sometimes they're not. I don't talk to people who've been drinking, usually. Most of the time I don't. I'll try to talk to them the next morning. But then over here, when they talk about moral psychology, right, that's such a confusing statement. What does that even mean, right? I still don't know fully what it means. I understand what it means now, but sometimes people will ask me, what do you think that means, right? And I'm still going back to my sponsor asking her, what does she think it means? I'd love to hear what Bill thinks it means. But I do, under where it says apply the powers of good, at some point in the past, I put the word God next to it. But then a little bit further on, when he says he acquired some ideas which he put into practical application at once, that is one of many places it points out idea plus action. We can't sit around and outthink this disease. I can't sit around and just think and have the self-knowledge. I have to put it into application. I have to get out there. And for years, I left this program in the book and I would talk about it. I could give whole talks on stuff that was in the book, and I had no idea I wasn't even using it in my life because I was so blind to what was happening for people around me. I wasn't even having a problem, right? But the people around me were. And until I could start to see some things, I didn't even know I wasn't using it in my life. I didn't know that I could have a peaceful mind. I was still managing. I was still in the second half of step one, you know, because I didn't think I needed. I was bought into the propaganda that if you're not drinking, you're good. But there's a few places in the book, top of 18, middle of 52, and 60 to 63, that I can look at those three places and compare them to the promises. And there's many promises, as some of you know. There aren't just the 8th, 9th step or 10th step promises. There's promises throughout this book. And I can look at those and compare them to how I'm doing, whether I'm a day sober or 37 years sober, right? And I can look at that and see, how am I doing? Because I'm not immune. I haven't been cured, you know, and my sponsor said we have to keep on growing. And so when I apply this stuff, I apply it to everything like it says, and it's all in there, right? But until I keep hitting those walls of self-will and it's not working, because I can make stuff work. Somebody said something about self-help sections of every bookstore are massively useless. Actually, we'll get to page 34 at some point. It says whether such a person can quit upon a non-spiritual basis depends upon the extent to which he's already lost the power to choose whether he will drink or not. I got here early. I was in self-will for years. I was a great little manager. And then I hit a bottom at 14 years. And I started to learn what these steps are actually about. And then I stayed in self-will for another 15 years, I think. Even though I had the knowledge, right? And then wham, some stuff happened, right? The trials and the low spots came. Anyway, back to where we are. Sorry. I just get excited, right? We can't outthink this disease. I can't know that I can't even know the program and have that be enough, right? Maybe for a while, right? But at some point, something's going to happen and I'm going to find out how good of a program I have and how well I'm using it in my life. That's it. Go ahead, Bill. Or do you want me to read
One
some?
of the things, you know, you talked about some people on here may be drinking and I can't smell their breath or smell their breath or know what's in the glass. But I'm going to tell you what, there are still treasure troves of what we call treatment centers here in Cleveland, Ohio, where there are 100 of people who have drank and smoked their lives into the ground. In other words, what I'm saying is if you're coming in on Zoom getting sober, it's hard to say that I was one of those hopeless, homeless alcoholics because I want to know where you get electricity, internet, and a computer. Because if I had those things, I'd still be drinking and getting high, just where the disease took me. Now, the good news about it is Alcoholics Anonymous is so strong and the spirit is so powerful that you can get sober on Zoom and not have to lose your kids, your mind, your freedom, your sanity, your computer, your internet, your electricity, be walking around destitute through whatever city you're in on the streets. But guess what? That's available to all of us if we don't pay attention to what's going on here, because alcoholism is a progressive disease. It tells us that. We're going to learn about it, which means guess what? Over any considerable period of time, we get worse, never better. So if you're coming in on Zoom, stay here. If not, you may be coming in on some other venue that you don't want to. Tonight, I go to one of our local prisons and share. Twice, two prisons I go to every week. And there are guys in there that are my age that have never seen the light of day as an adult, as a result of a bad decision made under the influence of alcohol and chemicals. And maybe that's what they're talking about, Elizabeth, moral psychology, because there's really something wrong with my morality when I'm in the grip of this disease. I will do anything in the name of one more. And under the influence, I may do anything that I'm not even aware of just because. So I think that's what they're talking about when you say the moral psychology. I guess you're volunteering me to read a little more, correct?
If you want, I can if you want.
Yeah, I was doing
Okay.
good. I didn't even make a mistake on the first page.
All right, bottom of XXVII. Of course, an alcoholic ought to be freed from his physical craving for liquor, and this often requires a definite hospital procedure before psychological measures can be of maximum benefit. Yeah, I want to stop there for a second because we're almost at the end of the talking time and opening up for the right. Until I don't want to. We can start the phenomenon of craving next week. That's a good one. We got 2 great pages to talk about that. But as far as be freed of his physical craving for liquor before, some people hate the book Living Sober, right? I loved it when I got here, right? Does not contain, it says in chapter 1, this does not contain a program of recovery from alcoholism, or I forget exactly what it says. But when you're brand new and your body is still screaming for alcohol, the first 3 to 10 days, right? I don't know exactly. I've heard 3 to 10 days. But man, you got to throw everything you got at it. And I sat in a breakout room with a woman that was in her first 60 days. And she's reminding this other woman who's on day 1, don't sit in the same place that you used to drink. I forgot about stuff like that. But when people don't have a hold of this yet, they're still, just learning what this program of recovery is. They got to throw everything they got at it. And I think that checking on people in their first few days, I don't wait for people to call me. I check on them. How are they doing? How you doing? You okay? You need anything? I'm here. Because those days are so hard, right? Because the physical part is still there. And in other countries I'm learning, like over here, we can walk into a detox center with no appointment, no insurance, no money. We have places here in Louisville, you can just walk in. But in some places they don't have that. They don't even have that. They can't walk into a detox, which I find really sad and interesting, so yeah. Go ahead, Bill.
Now, this would be my final statement. We'll open it up to the group to share. And you said we can walk in any detox now and so on and so forth. It used to be that we as sober members of Alcoholics Anonymous were able to go into those places. I remember one of our members of the Newberg group got sober in the 50s, and he said behind the podium, he said, God gave us Alcoholics Anonymous and God will never take it away. But if we are not careful, we will give up our birthright, which is 12-step work, to the treatment centers and professionals. And I'll tell you what, they take a big piece of the pie, which means not only they get the alcoholic confused, then they give them 30, 60, or 90 days of information that contradicts what takes place here in Alcoholics Anonymous. When he talked about the psychological measures can be of maximum benefit, they're going inside and examining their lives. I think they're talking about the 12 steps at that point, Elizabeth, rather than therapy from an outside help, because Bill had the experience where he realized that there was something wrong with him, that his resentments were blocking him from God, that making amends relieved the resentment. And if he wanted to keep this gift, he had to insist on giving it away, no matter what he thought, felt, or believed. All right, so we're good for the recording portion? All right, we're gonna stop the recording and then you guys are gonna come in.